the head retail investment at Chapel Hill Denham, and let's try as much as possible to dissect this further. Hello, Mr. Ebo, and welcome to the program.
Yeah, good morning, Nancy.
Yes, thanks for sticking by. Let's get started. A new variant, of course. I do know that all viruses mutate. They change their genetic code. Since COVID-19 invaded the world in late 2019, I must say, but came into Nigeria in 2020, we've seen different variants from Alpha to Beta to Gamma to Delta, now Omicron. How much of a concern should this be for Nigeria?
Okay, thank you. Looking at this new variant, the Omicron COVID variant, based on the initial studies that have been carried out, we are meant to know that in terms of its impact, is a bit mild. But the cheering news is also that the likes of Moderna, that's the leading vaccine producer, have also promised that early next year, around January, we should also find the vaccine. So I believe that there's been a lot of learnings from the different variants and how it has been handled. So in terms of impact, we don't expect for us to see as much impact as we had seen even during the third wave, compared to, or when you look at the third wave compared to even the second wave, there's been a lot of learning curves, and a lot of economists already know what to do. If you recall, during the initial phase, even in Nigeria, and that's February 2020, you would discover that everyone was trying to figure things out. Businesses were trying to see how they would be able to survive. Now, a lot of businesses have adjusted to an hybrid system. Most people, some are even still working from home. So I believe that overall, in terms of productivity, we will not see much impact. Yes, we've seen, based on initial reaction in terms of restrictions or ban of flights to some countries. And we believe that what they are just trying to do is just to take initial steps, and it will not take much time before that will be lifted. We know for most countries, what they've also put in place is that when you arrive, you also carry out your test maybe from the second day. So when we look at economic impact, we believe that in terms of productivity will not be significantly affected based on a lot of the learnings that have been taken from the different variants of COVID that we've seen in the last two years.
Ayo, should I take this your statement that we shouldn't be worried at all about it, since the world, yes, we're still struggling with the Delta variant that came in from India, I think October 2020. Should I take it that there's no cause for worry? Because I also listened to Joe Biden yesterday, who is the president of the United States. He said we should be concerned but not worry. But should we take the word of the U.S. president against that for us, since we're also seeing some countries right now imposing restrictions, so countries such as Canada, Australia, and how do you think that may even impact supply chains moving forward?
Okay, thanks. We would expect that some of these initial reactions will just last for a few weeks for them to be able to put control in place. What the step they are taking is trying to just nip it in the bud. So I agree with Joe Biden in terms of for us not to get worried, but we need to also align in terms of taking precautions. So you would see in the UK that the use of face masks has also been reinstated. So because there is no much, we shouldn't have much concern, doesn't mean that we should not take the right precaution. What would happen is that they will just put control in place. So, you know, based on some of the tests that have been done for people arriving in some of those countries, they are trying to prevent having more having most of them represent or having more people that have this new variant. So I believe that as we progress, the restrictions will be lifted. And if we also looking at our country in Nigeria, we know, yes, in terms of vaccination rate is still around 1.5%, but in terms of our immunity, we've also been able to build, I would say, a bit of immunity against the virus. Beyond that, we are also still taking precautions. Most people are aware of it now compared to last year, that a lot of people did not believe that it exists. And I believe that even government would also weigh the opportunity cost. So despite what is happening, what we may see is significant testing of people that arrive in the country. We know we're approaching the best festive period, and it's always a peak period for us because we have a lot of people coming into the country within that period. So there will have to be a bit of maybe number of days for isolation and testing so that we can curtail it at that end, because our growth is still very fragile, and we, especially African countries, Nigeria, we are still trying to crawl out of the crisis. We are not out yet. We are not out of the woods, and this may be a major setback if it's not nipped in the bud.
Now, since you've talked about our response, let's dwell a bit there. And I like that you brought in the idea of the vaccination rates for us. The government's plan is to vaccinate about 40% of Nigerians by the end of this year. I don't know how far we can get to that, because we've just vaccinated about 1.5% and 70% by 2022. How fast do you think that we can vaccinate more people? And if with the threat of this new Omicron variant, do you think that we can actually get there, and can we really have more vaccines to vaccinate people, especially with the vaccine mandate policy now that the federal government has come up with for federal workers? That's from tomorrow. I think it starts tomorrow, December 1. So do you think that this would really nip it in the bud? I hope you're following my train of thoughts, Ayo.
Okay, I think I get a bit of what we are trying to say. So I feel that in terms of vaccination, we know there are several views to it. So beyond making the vaccines available, there's also the challenge of people's belief. I know a lot of Nigerians that don't believe in the vaccine. So there's a limit to what the government can do. It's also just to intensify and continue to educate people for them to take the vaccine. And so government's efforts would be to also see how they can also make licensed private hospitals to also have it, so that it can be decentralized. And though while it's decentralized, there should also still be control. So I believe that as we progress, we will see increase with now the policy, increase in the vaccination rate, with now the policy, and that would also help at least build the immune system. Because based on studies, it's not that being vaccinated totally frees you from contacting the virus, but even if you contact the virus, it will also reduce the impact. It means you have antibodies that will fight that virus once it gets into your body. So I think government will continue to use several avenues, the religious organizations, different avenues to be able to encourage people to take this vaccine so that they can protect themselves and as well as protecting others. So I believe that there's still a lot to be done within that, and the target that government has set, I feel it's still a tall order compared to where we are.
Now, let's talk about this news. Do you think that the market was really caught off guard with this news? And how do you think that investors will position because of this news, especially in Nigeria, vis-a-vis the U.S. tapering too, and normalization that will soon begin to happen?
Okay, thanks. I'd like to start from the global space. So, with the news on Thursday, Friday, we saw significant dip in the market. The S&P dropped by over 500 points. But looking at trading yesterday, and based on investors' expectation, from looking at the view of investors, so we saw that knee-jerk reaction, which was expected, significant sell-off from the global space in the market across Europe. So we saw the S&P down by over 500 points. But interestingly, yesterday we saw a rebound. The market improved. A lot of the stocks that lost significantly. So investors were trying to buy the dip. And you also look at oil prices, that also stabilized, lost about 20% on over the weekend, between Friday and weekend, and as of yesterday was up by about 2% to around $71 per barrel. So we believe that investors would also be trying to use this as an opportunity to buy at a cheaper price. When you look at the valuation-wise, the U.S. market touched almost a new high on most of the stocks in the last few weeks. So yes, there's the concern that if in terms of the vaccine is not able to reduce the impact of this new variant, the Omicron variant, then there may be a major concern. But though, even if there's that concern, investors are also aware that a lot of the government or the countries have learned from this process. They know the right control to put in place. They know what has been effective in the past. And as a result, we won't expect any major decline in price of equity. So and also I would say coming home, looking at the Nigerian equities market, because of the current structure of our market, gone are the days where foreign investors dominated our market. We would have also seen that impact. But because retail still now currently controls about between 75 to 80% of the market, we didn't see a significant sell-off across our market, even on Friday and yesterday. So we expect that from the global space, investors should be positioning when they see any major dip, they take advantage of that because this will not last for long. And also coming home, we all know the psychology of a lot of or the way Nigerian investors play. They play they bet more on dividend. So we've already been seeing investors trying to take position ahead of the Q1 earnings, the full year earnings rather. And we know that MTN retail offer would also be opening this week. Investors are also expected to take advantage of that offer because it's going to be likely going to be at a discount, or it's going to be at a discount to the current price in the market. And we all know what MTN is into. MTN, in terms of their revenue, they've also been growing almost at an astronomical level, average of about 20 to 30% per annum. And in terms of dividend payouts, minimum dividend payout of about 80%. So by and large, we believe that there's opportunity for investors to take position in some of these stocks, despite some of the downside risks that we foresee in the market.
Now, which other economic challenges do you think is really staring us in the face currently? I don't want to preempt you, but what do you think is on the table right now of Nigerians? What are we really discussing mostly about economically?
So I think the first thing is the impact of inflation, because what inflation does is reduces your purchasing power. And we can see even from the IMF or World Bank reports that inflation has pushed a lot of Nigerians, I think about 20 to 30 million Nigerians into poverty. So it means what you could afford before, because of the increase in prices, you can no longer afford it. And there are a lot of factors that have been feeding into inflation. You talk about the exchange rate, it has almost a direct impact because we import a lot, and even goods that we don't import, when prices would move towards what they are also trading when you convert it within the international space. So we believe that inflation is a major concern. When you look at the price of diesel, price of gas, these are these are realities that Nigerians are trying to they are trying to understand, or they're trying to see how they want to work around it. So I believe that there's a lot of steps needs to be taken in terms of reducing cost of production. So that's cut across providing the right infrastructure, distribution network, providing the support. You have the issue of double taxation. So as a result of that, when prices of items increase significantly, people are unable to afford it, and as a result, impact in terms of standard of living.
Ayo, what's your view about fuel subsidy, the removal of fuel subsidy?
Okay, thanks. Very interesting question. I believe that subsidy should be removed, but it has to be faced. I just spoke earlier about the inflation, the impact that Nigeria is still trying to survive based on higher prices. So if government is looking at removing subsidy, it has to be faced. And also there needs to be a more robust blueprint in terms of what the savings will be used for. They need to tie it to projects that we can see that if government is taking out 30% of the estimated 3 trillion, so let's assume government wants to save 1 trillion this year, we need to see those projects that the 1 trillion will be used for, not just cash transfer. Cash transfer is like you are throwing money away, and there will be a lot of leakages that government itself will not have control over. So we see how government have structured the Sukuk fund in the past few years, and you can trace those projects. The funds are given to custodians or trustees to hold, and they release funds based on milestone achieved. So we can structure something interesting that provides transparency, and at the end of the year, government will provide that evidence that, see, we saved 1 trillion this year from subsidy, and these are the projects that we can use, we can prove with it. And over time, once confidence is built, Nigerians will not have problem, because the concerns that we all have is that you save the subsidy and we pay high prices, and at the end of the day, we can't account, or the government can't account for that savings. And it will mean that we are losing from two ways. We are paying more for fuel, and we are not also getting that that support that fund should be providing.
What do you mean by faced? That if government should embark on the fuel subsidy removal, which is in the law of the PIA, because the PIA has been signed by Mr. President, so it should be done also to encourage new investors into the sector. What do you mean by faced? I really wanted to understand that.
So what I mean by, yeah, thanks. So what I mean by phased is it should be a gradual removal. So if government wants to remove, if total subsidy is like 200 naira today, government can decide to have a benchmark to remove 30% of the subsidy and try to show us some transparency on how the funds have been used. Yes, it's a chicken and egg situation that we are also trying to attract investment, but the removal of subsidy alone will not attract investment into the oil and gas sector. There are a lot of challenges. The insecurity concerns are still there, and you see a lot of the within the oil and gas space. most other African countries are enjoying more direct investment than Nigeria. So it's just beyond just regulating that sector. Yes, there are a lot of other factors that other considerations that needs to be taken care of before we can see or enjoy the full benefits of the new PIA.
Now, for an average Nigerian, the removal of fuel subsidy, it's going to bring untold hardship to Nigerians, bearing in mind that if fuel is removed, what an average Nigerian thinks is that transport cost would increase, and that transport cost would, dovetail into food prices. Our inflation rate is at the last count was at 15.99%. So if that is added on to food prices, to other things that are being consumed in Nigeria, especially food products, because Nigerians spend 3/4 of their income on food and the remaining on other things. How do you think that there should be a balancing act? Because we've been on this subsidy issue, the removal of fuel subsidy now for close to 20 years.
Okay, thanks. I like your perspective, which aligns with what I was trying to say in terms of facing it. So there needs to be a balancing. Based on the current state of the economy, we started with looking at the likely impact of this new variant on Nigeria. And we all know we are not out of the woods yet. So most Nigerians are still struggling. A lot of Nigerians lost their job. A lot are still on maybe half salary. And now everyone is trying to find these are feet. So adding this major shock of total removal of subsidies would add to the pain. And that is why, even when you look at even developed clients, there were a lot of quantitative easing, a lot of support that those governments they also gave to their populace. So yes, Nigeria also tried from its own angle, but when you look at also the amount, is less than about 5% of what is actually required. Yes, we know government is limited. So I would say that it's currently, looking at the timing, Nigerians are still going through a lot. So, and if there's a total removal of subsidy, prices of goods and services would increase significantly. We all know that there's also the feed on the impact of exchange rate. So by the time you combine these two, prices will become, goods will become unaffordable, and more Nigerians will go into poverty. The 5,000 naira per month will not solve the problem. So, and that is why, to balance this, it needs to be faced maybe over the next 2 years. We know we've been on this for over 5 or 6 years. When oil prices came down to about $20 per barrel, that would have been the best time, because price did not just move to the current $70 per barrel at once. So there would have been a gradual adjustment over time. But with the gap, government has been paying for that subsidy for more than have been filling that gap since prices increased. The price of crude oil rather increased significantly. So removing it at once now would not be the right timing and would lead to a lot of sufferings for Nigerians.
Okay, Hill Denham. Ayo, we've spoken about COVID-19. We did speak about that earlier. We're speaking about fuel subsidy now. What other things do you think risk that are facing us, even as we end the year? Because if you take a look at even the removal of fuel subsidy, I was at the World Bank Nigeria Development Update Lunch last week. I moderated at that event. And Nasir El-Rufai, the governor of Kaduna State, was on the panel with the finance minister, Mele Kyari, the GMD of NNPC Limited. And the governor of Kaduna State said it clearly, without mincing words, that if this fuel subsidy is not removed, that states, and is speaking even on behalf of other governors, that states would not be able to pay salaries in the next few months. Take that, then you go over to some other fiscal risk that are facing us.
Okay, thanks. I think I'll start from the comment that states will not be able to pay salaries. Uh, yes, we know based on the current structure, uh, the subsidies is removed before the allocation is shared, the revenue is shared to the states. So it's been impacting on the governors. Yes, so it has a very strong point there. However, we also expect that a lot of states are over dependent, have placed too much dependence rather on this FAC allocation such that they are not developing those states um, internally to develop and increase the internal revenue that those states can generate. So I would classify the FAC allocation as like the easy money, which is impacting development in the states. So we believe that states should reduce their reliance on back allocation. I feel yes, it will take a lot of time, but there are a lot of opportunities in some of these states that they can become an economy, a major exporter of a particular item, and they will be earning FX, and they will be able to also generate employment. We know we've not spoken about the issue of insecurity. Removing subsidies, again, by the time you push more people into poverty, that may also fuel insecurity, because if there's a reduction in demand, there will be a reduction in production, and as a result, there will be a reduction in employment rates. So we need to check and look at the links between these. So it's not just removing it. There needs to be a major plan. I believe that the current plan to just do cash transfer of 5,000 naira for 6 months to 3 million, 30 million Nigerians is not the solution. It's like we are throwing away over 600 billion that we won't be able to account for. So there needs to be a more constructive way to remove this subsidy. And I will re-emphasize that it can be faced and see how it's done over time. Also looking at some of the other risks that faces us, it's more of, we can also look at the issue of insecurity. Yes, I touched on it earlier, but it's affecting a lot of sectors. It's affecting distribution. You also, where you are privy to, or we all read in the news of the crisis going on within the Abuja-Kaduna road. That's distributing goods around that. It means taking goods from Abuja to Lake and to Kaduna, or from Kaduna to Abuja will be impacted. The cost will be higher. So we need to also pay attention to handling this. When you look at food inflation is over 20%. Currently, we're approaching the harvest season. But when you look at what did we produce, what were we able to plant, it reduced compared to last year, despite a lot of the interventions from the CBN because of the insecurity. A lot of the food producing states, or a lot of the farmers were unable to cultivate because of the fear of losing their lives. So these are major concerns that we should look at. And if we're able to tackle this, it means that in terms of food inflation will reduce, which would also impact on the headline inflation. So by and large, I would state that before the end of this year, we should try to see how we want to put in a blueprint for us to phase out subsidies.
Thank you very much, Ayo. I think we should leave it at that, and we'll continue the conversation another time, because so many postulations are coming in from different analysts. Labour also has its own, that there shouldn't be removal of fuel subsidy, the Christian community, a lot of people. But what really makes economic sense? And Nigerians are also there saying, we don't trust the government, because even if you tell us that you're going to remove the fuel subsidy, that money will go into private pockets. But I also hear you that it should be faced, and there should be a framework that the monies that will be removed from fuel subsidy, Nigerians should see what projects, like we see for Sukuk bonds, specific projects and all of that. But I think what is most important is that it is time for engagement. It is time for serious engagement across board. Thank you very much, Ayodeji, for joining us on today's edition of the program.
Always my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, I've been speaking with Ayodeji Ebo, who is the head retail investment at Chapel Hill Denham. We've been looking at economic issues from fuel subsidy to the new Omicron variant of COVID-19. All right, I'm Nancy Naji. Be the best you can be and be the change you want to see. Don't forget to stay safe. Stay safe. Wear your mask. Don't take off your mask. Take it off where you feel safe. Use your hand sanitizers and wash your hands. Washing of hands is one culture that I don't think should leave us again. I'll see you all next time. Bye now.